cartoons incensed Muslims as they portrayed the Prophet, peace be upon him, as a bin Laden-type character of violence. This then portrayed Islam as a violent religion, which to Muslims it is not. Despite the offensive nature of the cartoons, the South African Muslim community demonstrated and protested peacefully against this offense.
Since time immemorial, since our time, Prophet Muhammad was born 571 years after Prophet Jesus, peace be upon them. No one has ever dared to try to paint a picture of the Prophet or caricature, and it will be a dangerous precedent if it's allowed now through and with the Western media trying to sort of create images where our Prophet is degraded, humiliated, and so I think the whole idea is now to sort of preempt this type of conduct by the Western press so that it doesn't happen again.
There are rights, there are many rights, but there are certain rights which are more important than other rights, and this is labeled fundamental rights. The right to life is a fundamental right that's unrestricted. The freedom of expression is another fundamental right. This fundamental right, however, is limited, it's restricted. Now we must debate and ask ourselves, what are the circumstances and instances when this right, this freedom of expression, must be restricted or limited? We have the freedom of expression seen against the freedom of religion. There's two competing fundamental rights here. We have a large sector of our community wanting to ensure they have freedom of religion. Another sector saying that they want freedom of expression that's unrestricted. But it cannot be unrestricted because the Constitution, which is the soul of our nation, restricts it.
As we, the Muslim Ummah, stand at this point, abused and under the lights of the world, we say openly to the people, we are the followers of the greatest prophet who has ever lived.
There is no merit in causing gratuitous offense, as these cartoons undoubtedly do. We believe it is possible to demonstrate our commitment to the principle of free speech in more sensible ways.
We have sent the message out to the public of South Africa that we are peace-loving people, and we will never ever accept anyone to insult our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And this will not stop there. We're going to continue with the boycott campaign against the Danish product until these people apologize for whatever they have done.
My reaction to that obviously is that that's not an acceptable way to act. To my mind, that is a step, not a step forward, that's a step backward. And I don't think that that is really the answer to the problems that we face at the moment. I think what we want is a world in which we interact, both economically, socially, politically, and so forth, And trade relations obviously is an important part of that kind of interaction,
And the reaction here was nowhere near of the intensity or ferocity, and certainly of the violence that was exhibited in certain places in the Middle East and in Europe. But there was a reaction, but it's my experience of the Muslim community here. And I go back to, for instance, the hearings of the task group that was set up to examine our censorship laws in 1995 or 1994, where the intention was to throw open freedom of expression and in fact do away with censorship, which in fact was achieved by the legislation that came out of that exercise. But I noticed at those hearings, the Muslims were particularly sensitive to any suggestion that there could be things said about their religion that could be regarded as denigrating the religion. They were very sensitive about not allowing any of their susceptibilities towards religion to be overstepped.
This sensitive concern about Islam being portrayed in the media came to the fore when the Mail and Guardian printed one of the offensive cartoons, not expecting a backlash from their Muslim readers.
I think that I see the point now. I see the anger which any depiction of the Prophet Muhammad will cause amongst the majority Muslim world. It's not something which I'll do again. We apologized quite unconditionally and profusely for having published it. But some of the reaction was, for me, intolerant and absolutely unnecessary, especially in a country like ours.
I do have a problem with religious groups dictating what can and can't be said or depicted by people generally and in the media, and in particular people who are not part of their faiths. And that really goes across the board. I'm talking all religions. Most of the major religions do that. I don't feel that I should be precluded from depicting Muhammad, who was an historical figure, in the same way as I've depicted Jesus and Moses. And I don't think it should be prescribed, it should be dictated by religious groups, but I have my own take on it. I wouldn't have wanted to take part in the original exercise run by the Danish newspaper, which I thought was a bit of a wrong-headed exercise, almost guaranteed just to be a kind of an insult.
The cartoons, published in Denmark and widely across Europe, set out to depict but not to ridicule the Prophet, and they do so in a growing climate in which Muslims across the globe feel alienated, threatened, and routinely despised by the world's great powers. The question is, why would the Danish media escalate such fears in the world with these cartoons?
You're looking at these cartoons having been published in a Europe which is increasingly anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim, increasingly Islamophobic. Particularly Denmark. I mean, Denmark is one of the, if not the most racist country in Europe now. It has a government of a coalition of 3 parties, all of whom are anti-immigrant parties, the leader of one of which has been indicted for hate speech. So that's the kind of context. And the newspaper that published these cartoons is a newspaper which is about 100 years old almost, and has historically had links with Italian and German fascism, is known to be an anti-immigrant, to take an anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim line, supports the anti-immigrant policies of the current Danish government. And that creates the space for arguing that in fact this is really more about hate speech than anything else.
I can't actually recognize these ways of sort of describing the situation in my country, and we have tried to also put forward, you know, a more precise kind of statement on what the current situation is in our country. You know, we have, just as we have freedom of expression, we have freedom of religion in my country. We have 20 approved Muslim societies there. There are mosques in Denmark. There are, you know, burial places in Denmark for Muslims. So they have every right, like any other religious community, to exercise their religion in my country. And I'm not saying that there's not always issues of integration that you have to address. But I must say I have been quite concerned to see some of the quite distorted sort of images of the country. And it doesn't reflect the mainstream attitude.
I don't get the impression that they intended to provoke, because there was a great deal of shock, particularly in Denmark, when I think it was one of their embassies or one of their consulate generals was burnt down in one of the Middle Eastern cities. I think there was a great deal of shock. So if they were intending to create a furor which would develop into overt hostility and violence to the extent that it would justify, shall we say, Islamophobia, I don't think that the record speaks in that regard.